Greetings to my dear guests on this video. I wish you a pleasant viewing and look forward to your feedback in the comments. I sat at my desk on the 19th floor, the skyline of Manhattan blurring into soft hues through the tinted glass. My name, Emily Hart, was still etched on the plaque outside the door, but something about today made me glance at it twice. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I'd been working on the most important project of my career, and something about the energy in the office felt off. The deal on my screen had the potential to shift the entire landscape of enterprise cloud security. I'd been refining it for 9 months, coordinating with European legal teams, smoothing out compliance kinks, mapping the data infrastructure so precisely it could survive a Category 5 disruption. A $250 million merger was hinging on it. My name was on every key draft, every number crunched. Every late night and lost weekend poured into that pitch deck. But you wouldn't know it if you listened to how Darren spoke to me. Darren Becker, CEO of Caliber Tech, had a voice like a velvet hammer, soft, smooth, and crushing if you weren't careful. At first, I thought I was imagining the subtle digs, the way he'd breeze into meetings and ask if I'd typed up the notes when I'd actually led the entire strategy session, or how he'd refer to me as the compliance girl in front of VPs. That one really stuck. That morning, we'd had a pre-pitch alignment call. The mood was tense, mostly because everyone in that conference room knew what was at stake. I'd barely started walking them through the risk matrix when Darren cut me off with a chuckle. "Let's not get too deep in the weeds," he said, looking around the table like he was sharing an inside joke. "Emily's got the paperwork covered. We can handle the rest." Paperwork. I felt my stomach twist. Around the table, a few team members glanced awkwardly at their coffee cups. Nobody challenged him. Not even David, who had once admitted after drinks that the entire architecture of the deal was pure Emily. I just smiled, as I always did, and flipped to the next slide. Later that day, I heard him in his office through the thin glass walls. His voice was low but sharp. "She's good with forms and flags, legal glue, but this deal needs vision. I've got David and the partners for that." It wasn't the first time I'd been underestimated, but it was the first time I knew I was being actively sidelined. This wasn't just a comment, it was a maneuver. Still, I stayed focused. There was too much riding on this. I'd quietly been preparing contingencies, not because I didn't trust my team, but because I didn't trust Darren. By 8 p.m., the office had cleared out. I was still there, adjusting slide 47 on the data breach contingency model. The lights in the corridor were motion-activated, and every now and then they'd click off, plunging the room into a ghostly blue from the skyline outside. I didn't move, just kept working. I thought about the non-disclosures I'd had our attorneys review in my name, the backup files I'd stored, encrypted, on a private cloud, the pitch variation I hadn't shown anyone yet, a version with a different trajectory, a different rollout schedule, a different name at the top. Mine. Darren didn't know it, but I'd been preparing for exactly this kind of play. Because if I was just the girl for paperwork, then he wouldn't even see it coming. I wasn't going to let Darren ruin this. The deal, codenamed Project Arclight, was more than a contract. It was a merger that would reshape digital infrastructure across the East Coast. A $250 million partnership between Caliber Tech and a fintech giant, HelixCore. If this deal landed, our firm would triple its valuation. I knew it. More importantly, they knew it too. And I was the one holding the blueprint. Despite Darren's smug comments, I had something more powerful than his approval: the numbers. My models had sliced their projected integration costs by 32%. My compliance structure passed 2 independent audits in record time. I'd identified the key vulnerabilities in HelixCore's network before their own CTO did. While Darren basked in boardroom ego, I was in the trenches with the code, the contracts, the strategy. The only reason we were even in the final round of HelixCore's selection process was because of my work. And yet, Darren was already scheduling meetings without me, pitch rehearsals, partner dinners, positioning himself as the architect of Arclight. Let him posture. I had the real leverage. Because HelixCore didn't want a pitch, they wanted a solution, and I was the only one who had it. That morning, I received a secure email from Clara Joe, their head of integration. Her message was direct. Need a sanity check on the shared server load model. Something's not matching your last draft." I smiled. She wasn't going to Darren or David, she was coming to me. I toggled over to the forecast charts, and sure enough, she was right. One of the usage prediction scripts had reverted to an earlier version, a bug introduced when Darren's team tried to streamline the slides for visual appeal. I fixed it in under 6 minutes, reran the numbers, and attached a note. Version B4, 3 now includes updated usage burst logic. Let me know if you need a walkthrough. 10 minutes later, "You're a lifesaver. Honestly, you should be running this deal." And that's when it hit me. They knew. They all knew. I wasn't just the person behind the curtain anymore. I was the reason the curtain was still standing. But the real twist came later that afternoon, when I received a calendar invite from someone unexpected. Julian Keats, CFO of Helix Corp. Subject line: One-on-one, deal oversight clarification. The meeting was just the two of us. No Darren, no David, just me and the man with the signing authority on a $250 million deal. I stared at the screen, pulse suddenly quickening. If he wanted clarity, he wasn't going to the CEO. He was going to the woman Darren had called the paperwork girl. I clicked accept, and just like that, the balance started to shift. I walked into the meeting with Julian Keats exactly 3 minutes early. Just enough to be professional, not overeager. He greeted me with a nod, barely glancing at the notes in front of him. "Miss Hart," he said, his tone precise, "I appreciate you making the time." "Of course," I replied, smoothing the edge of my blazer. "I understand you had some concerns about the oversight structure?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed the folder in front of him and leaned forward. "Let me be candid. The proposal is impressive, but there's a disconnect between what I'm seeing in the material and what I'm hearing from Caliber Tech's executive team." My heart paused, just for a second. "A disconnect?" I asked, careful to keep my voice steady. He tapped a finger on the folder. "Your name is on every key framework, every contingency model. When we ask technical questions, your answers come back cleaner, faster, and more complete than anyone else's. But internally, we're being told your support, that you're not leading." There it was. Darren. He was trying to edge me out of my own deal. Julian tilted his head. "So, I need to know, are you the architect of this platform or not?" I looked him square in the eye. "I am." He nodded once, slowly. "Good. That's what I thought." After the meeting, I returned to my desk with my thoughts spinning like loose paper in a wind tunnel. I didn't doubt my work. I didn't doubt the relationship I'd built with Helix Corp. But Darren, he was another story. I knew that look he'd given me earlier in the hallway. The tight jaw, the over-firm pat on the back. He knew something had shifted. He could feel control slipping, and I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't let that go quietly. Sure enough, just past 4 p.m., I was called into his office. Darren was seated, casual, too casual, his elbows on the arms of his sleek black chair, his hands folded like a man playing chess. "Heard you had a sit-down with Keats," he said, not bothering to look up. "It was productive," I replied. "I'll bet." He leaned back, his smile sharp. "He's got a good eye. But these C-level guys, they get confused. They don't always understand structure, roles." I said nothing. My silence only seemed to irritate him. "You're doing a fine job, Emily," he added, tone dropping to something almost patronizing. "But let's be clear, you're on this project to support, to execute, not to steer." I swallowed hard. That was it. The warning shot. He knew he was losing his grip, and now he was laying the groundwork. To undermine, to reframe, maybe even to blame if things went south. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying his words, the subtle threats wrapped in faux encouragement. I knew Darren. He wouldn't sabotage the deal outright. He'd do something quieter. A whisper here, a misleading comment there. If he needed a fall girl, I was in the perfect position. And suddenly, I wasn't just fighting for recognition. I was fighting for survival. The tension in the office thickened by the hour. Since my meeting with Julian Keats, Darren had been circling me like a wolf, sensing its prey was no longer afraid. He started small, removed me from internal calendar invites, had David run lead on updates I'd created, Even renamed the shared project folder from ArcLight to Executive Roundtable Final. But the real blow came Friday morning. I was barely through my second cup of coffee when Marla from HR tapped on my door. "Darren wants to see you, now." I gathered my notepad, although I had a sinking feeling I wouldn't need it. When I walked into his office, Darren was already standing. His jacket was off, shirt sleeves rolled, a power move. Behind him, the skyline glared through the windows, sharp and unsympathetic. He didn't ask me to sit. "Emily," he started, voice smooth but firm. "This partnership is at a delicate juncture, and we need to present a unified leadership front." I nodded slowly. Agreed. He exhaled through his nose, then dropped the act. "Which is why we're making some adjustments." My chest tightened. "What kind of adjustments?" "You're off ArcLight," he said bluntly. "Effective immediately." For a moment, all I could hear was the faint hum of the office HVAC. I stared at him. "What?" "You've been invaluable in getting us to this point," he went on, like he was giving a retirement speech. "But from here, it's a different game. Executive optics, high-level negotiation, not compliance logistics." I felt the blood leave my face. "Darren, I built this deal." He cut me off with a scoff. "You did some excellent groundwork, Emily, but don't confuse groundwork with leadership." And then came the words that would echo in my head for days. "You're just a woman for paperwork," he said. "We'll do everything without you from now on." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. He didn't give me a chance. "Will formalize the transition," he said, reaching for a folder that looked suspiciously prepped. "David will brief the partners, and for what it's worth, don't take it personally." I stood there, spine straight, hands clenched at my sides. "But you are making it personal," I said quietly. He didn't respond, just sat back down, flipping open his laptop like I was already gone. That night, I sat in my apartment, lights off, laptop open, staring at the encrypted backup of the real pitch. My pitch. The version no one had seen but me and a very small, very strategic group I'd quietly consulted. They thought they could erase me, but I hadn't spent the last 6 months preparing a $250 million deal without a contingency. They didn't know I had a plan, and they definitely didn't know I was about to use it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream or throw my phone across the room or blast some heartbreak playlist into the early hours. That might have been me years ago, back when I still believed that if you worked hard enough, played fair enough, someone would notice. But that girl was gone. Now I sat in silence, curled up on the couch in my high-rise apartment, the city of glass and steel below glittering like it didn't know what had happened to me today. The skyline didn't care, but neither did I. Not anymore. Not about appearances, not about office politics, and definitely not about what Darren Becker thought he could get away with. He made his move, loud, cruel, and clumsy. Now it was my turn, and mine was going to be silent, precise, surgical. I got up, crossed to my desk, and opened the slim matte black laptop I kept locked in a separate drawer. This one wasn't for caliber tech work. It was mine, and it held everything. I entered my encryption key, waited for the digital fortress to unlock, and there it was. My war chest, my files, my documentation, my blueprint, Project Midas. I named it after the king who turned everything he touched into gold. Not because I was arrogant, but because I had finally realized what I'd built, what they thought they could steal, wasn't just good. It was invaluable. ArcLight had been the visible shell, but beneath that, I'd been crafting something smarter, sleeker, and impossible to replicate without me. All the compliance innovations, the predictive integrations, the adaptive escalation response protocols, all mine, code signed, time-stamped, patent pending, quietly filed under Heart Strategies LLC 3 months ago during one of those vacation weeks Darren insisted I take to rest. He had no idea I spent that entire week with a lawyer and a startup advisor in a co-working space downtown, laying legal foundation for every line of innovation he was now trying to sell without me. He didn't know the source code in ArcLight's core framework was never fully shared with his team. The crucial parts were demo-only, built in isolated sandboxes, and all access routes tied directly to my key. He didn't know that Helix Core's lead tech strategist had sent me a confidential message the night before. There's something missing in what we received this week. Did they revise the system layout? No, I thought. They tried to duplicate what they didn't understand. Now the weight of everything began to lift. I had the code, I had the proof, I had the relationships, and I had a plan. Step 1. Reach out to Clara Jo at Helix Core quietly. Let her know, without triggering alarms, that the original system design came from me, and that Caliber Tech's version no longer included the license structure they were expecting. Step 2. Lock down every vendor and contributor I'd worked with. I pulled up my NDA roster, over a dozen independent contractors and tech consultants, all bound by airtight confidentiality clauses. No one could claim ignorance. If Darren tried to build from what I'd shown, he'd be stepping into a legal landmine. Step 3. Activate the alternate pitch, the one I never submitted to Darren. The one that had been quietly reviewed by a few venture contacts I'd kept in my back pocket. One of them, in particular, had left me a voicemail last week. If Caliber Tech won't fund this, I know a dozen people who will. Call me. And I was going to call him. Tomorrow. But tonight? Tonight was for steel. For stillness. For remembering who I was before Darren ever tried to shrink me into a shadow of my own brilliance. He thought firing me would neutralize a threat. What he didn't realize was that I'd been preparing for this very betrayal, not because I didn't believe in teamwork, but because I'd spent too many years in rooms where being brilliant wasn't enough unless someone else stamped their name on your work. I would not disappear. I would not shrink. I would not hand over the empire I built and settle for a paperwork girl. Because tomorrow, when they find out they can't run ArcLight without me, when the Helix Core team starts asking the questions only I can answer, they won't be dismissing me. They'll be begging. And when that moment comes, I won't walk back in quietly. I'll walk in on my terms, or not at all. Monday morning came with a quiet roar, the kind that builds behind your ribcage when you know the storm isn't coming. You are the storm. Most people expected I'd take the hint and disappear, that I'd hand in a resignation and slink off into the background, too embarrassed to fight. Darren certainly did. But that was the mistake, because Darren hadn't officially fired me. He'd just removed me from Project ArcLight, with a smirk and a line about me being just a woman for paperwork. A convenient reassignment framed as a strategic pivot, not a termination, not even a formal demotion, just a quiet exile designed to humiliate without paperwork, which meant I still had a badge, still had a desk, still had a front row seat to the disaster unfolding in real time. So I came in, head held high, not as a broken player, but as the architect of what they were trying to steal. And I knew the one thing Darren didn't. You can't lead what you don't understand. He had removed me from the pitch, sure. Stripped my name from the documents, sidelined me in every way he could without triggering legal HR protocol. But what he couldn't remove was the truth. The system doesn't work without me. And I was about to make sure everyone realized it. It started in the break room with Marcus. "Morning," I said, casually pouring coffee. "How's deployment prep going?" He let out a long sigh. "Rough. Server response times spiked overnight. No one's sure why." "Did they use the script I wrote? The reallocation module?" His brow furrowed. "I don't think that was in the last batch." I smiled, just a little. "That'll be why." I walked away before he could ask more. Let the thought settle. Let the question bloom. Later that day, I passed Jenna from the analytics team. She looked up from her screen, frustration etched into her face. "Emily, quick! Do you remember which file had the regional compliance triggers?" she asked. I paused. The tagged batch was embedded in the automation flow, but if Darren's new setup is missing them, that would explain the gap. Her face fell. "No wonder the reporting's wrong." I murmured, curious how those details get lost. I wasn't attacking him. I didn't have to. I was just illuminating things, quietly, methodically. By midweek, the team was cracking. I could feel it. The questions were louder now, more pointed. Slack pings started sliding into my inbox again. "Do you have the original matrix model?" Any chance you can clarify the trigger flow Darren skipped? Was this your original data logic? It's way better. Each time, I responded just enough. Just a breadcrumb. Enough to remind them, I knew this system. I built it. And the man they were now blindly following? He didn't even know where the exits were. Even David, Darren's right hand, was showing signs of doubt. I caught him staring at an error log with a look of helplessness I hadn't seen before. Need help? I asked, sweet as sugar. He didn't answer, but he didn't say no either. It wasn't revenge I was after. It was truth, and the truth was, you can't delete the architect and expect the building to stand. I wasn't sabotaging Darren. I was letting him sabotage himself. And the team? They were starting to see it. By Thursday, the shift was no longer subtle. People weren't just asking me for clarification. They were seeking direction. Slipping into my office for off-the-record chats, sending late-night messages that started with, "If I'm being honest." The team was nervous, not because of me, but because of the chaos that had taken root under Darren's leadership. His blunders were compounding. The missing compliance layer triggered a warning from HelixCore's legal department. The botched server load simulation wasted 3 days of prep. And when the security overlay failed to auto-deploy, everyone turned to David. David, who finally muttered the words I'd been waiting for. "We need Emily." But I wasn't interested in rejoining under Darren's thumb. No, I'd graduated from that game. I wasn't taking back a seat at his table. I was flipping the board. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a steaming cup of green tea and my laptop open to a folder I'd labeled, Fail Safe. Inside were the 3 key documents I'd been quietly compiling. A formal complaint, carefully worded, rooted in performance data and policy violations. No emotion, just facts. Every time Darren overstepped, every time he bypassed protocol, every reckless executive decision he'd made, logged, time-stamped, verified. A petition, already signed by 5 senior team members, requesting a review of Darren's leadership on Project ArcLight. Their reasoning? Repeated mismanagement leading to breach of client trust, operational failure, and compromised deliverables. A proposed interim restructure, naming me as acting project lead, just until things were stabilized, of course. Caliber Tech had a clause in its project governance charter, Section 6.3, Operational Integrity Override. It allowed for temporary leadership changes if a project was at risk and the existing executive oversight was deemed non-compliant. Most employees didn't even know that clause existed. I did. And so did Jonathan Royce, the general counsel for Caliber Tech, who I emailed that night with the documents attached and a brief message. Mr. Royce, please review the enclosed materials regarding Project ArcLight's current leadership status. Per Section 6.3 of the Operational Charter, I am formally requesting an internal hearing to reassess the executive alignment. Respectfully, Emily Hart. By Friday, things were already in motion. Royce replied before noon. Received and under review. This situation warrants immediate attention. David avoided my eyes in the morning meeting. Jenna brought me coffee instead of Darren. And Marcus? He quietly forwarded me the latest system error log, subject line. They still don't get it. Even Clara from HelixCore messaged me again. What's going on at your end? This used to be airtight. Used to be, I thought. And soon, it would be again. But this time, under my name, because I wasn't just saving a project anymore. I was reclaiming what should have been mine all along. The office was nearly empty when I returned that night. I'd waited until most of the team had gone home. The lights on the executive floor were dim, casting long shadows across the frosted glass walls. My footsteps echoed down the corridor like secrets I wasn't supposed to carry. I wasn't there to work. I was there to finish collecting the final piece of proof. I needed the original executive approval logs, the ones Darren had falsified to push ArcLight past the compliance gate without proper sign-off. Royce's team would need hard evidence, dates, timestamps, audit trails, and I knew where they were. They lived on Darren's restricted drive. I'd learned months ago that Darren used a local copy protocol to archive key docs, paranoid, even from the IT team. What he didn't realize was that during the development phase, I'd been granted admin credentials to monitor sync lag across our shared servers. It had since been revoked, but a forgotten offline backup still mirrored his personal folder. And tonight, I had access. Or so I thought. I was deep in the archive, copying one incriminating folder after another onto my secure flash drive when I heard it, the creak of his office door. Then footsteps, and then his voice. Cold, sharp, too close. Emily? I froze. For one horrifying moment, I thought maybe I could pretend I hadn't heard him. But when I turned, he was already there. Standing in the doorway, jaw tight, eyes locked on the open server logs displayed on the screen behind me. His voice dropped, ice over gravel. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The panic hit me fast, faster than reason. My body moved before my brain caught up. I slammed the laptop shut, yanked the flash drive, and darted toward the hallway. "Emily!" he barked. I heard the chair crash behind me. I ran. Not a jog, not a fast walk. I ran. Down the corridor, past the elevators, straight to the stairwell. My heels clicked wildly against the concrete steps as I descended 2 flights before I stopped, breath ragged, heart galloping. He didn't follow. Or if he did, he wasn't fast enough. I leaned against the wall, chest heaving, flash drive clutched in my palm like a lifeline. That was close. Too close. If he'd gotten to me even 2 minutes earlier, he could have deleted the files. Called security. Twisted the narrative into something I couldn't untangle. He knew now. He knew I was coming for him, and he wouldn't play nice again. I texted Jenna. Out sick. Not coming in tomorrow. Possibly longer. Then I opened a new email window and typed one word to Jonathan Royce. Urgent. I wouldn't step foot back in that office until the hearing was confirmed, until legal protections were in place, until I had the upper hand again. Because now I was prey, and Darren was cornered. And cornered men are dangerous. The conference room was gleaming with glass and ego. Darren stood at the front, sleeves neatly rolled, voice smooth as butter as he welcomed the Helix Corps delegation. Around him, the room buzzed with soft chatter, shuffling chairs, and the occasional clink of espresso cups. Caliber Tech's executive team lined the sides of the table, forced smiles in place, all of them pretending this was just another pitch. But it wasn't just any pitch. This was the moment. The $250 million presentation that would determine the future of Project ArcLight, and, if Darren had his way, the erasure of the person who built it. Me. He glanced at the head seat, empty. No sign of me. He smirked. David cleared his throat. We'll begin with the strategic overview of our platform, which was designed in-house by our executive team and refined under the leadership of Mr. Becker. The lights dimmed. The screen blinked. And suddenly, without warning, the projector flickered to a new frame. Not a chart, not a slide, a video. And there I was, sitting in a softly lit room, calm, composed, every hair in place. "Good morning," I said, my voice measured, smooth. "I apologize for my absence today, but I felt it necessary to clarify a few things before the presentation proceeds." A collective rustle swept through the room. Darren's face turned pale. "What is this?" he hissed. No one answered. Everyone was watching me. "The system you're reviewing today, Project ArcLight, was developed over the course of 8 months by myself, Emily Hart," I continued. "Every core component, every compliance module, and every integration pathway was designed and executed under my direction." I paused, letting that settle. There have been recent attempts to present this system as a product of collective executive oversight. That is incorrect. The documented build history, source code logs, and provisional patent filings, all of which have been submitted to legal counsel, clearly identify myself as the sole architect of the platform's foundation. Darren stood. "Turn it off," he snapped. But no one moved. I kept speaking. I urged the Helix Corps review team to request full documentation before proceeding with any agreement. Transparency matters, integrity matters, and you deserve to know who built the system you're investing in. The screen went black. Silence. Then someone from the Helix Corps side, Julian Keats, turned to Darren slowly, coolly. "You said this was developed internally by your team?" Darren cleared his throat, but no words came out. David leaned forward. "We may need to verify the documentation." Julian raised an eyebrow. Yes, I think you should. The meeting unraveled. People stood, murmured, phones lit up. Caliber Tech's legal rep darted out of the room. Darren looked like a man drowning in his own suit. He'd walked into the room certain he'd buried me. Instead, he walked into a trap I'd built in silence. And now, the spotlight was exactly where it belonged. The fallout was swift. By noon the next day, Caliber Tech was crawling with auditors, internal and external. The Helix Core team had halted negotiations within hours of the presentation and submitted a formal request for document verification. Darren hadn't seen it coming. He'd been too busy puffing up his resume, cutting me out, and rehearsing a lie so often he'd started to believe it himself. What he hadn't done: cover his tracks. You'd think that someone so obsessed with power would at least be meticulous. But arrogance makes people sloppy. He hadn't reissued the internal documentation. He hadn't altered the changelogs or tampered with the version control history. He thought removing me from the team was enough to erase my fingerprint on every major decision. It wasn't. In fact, every step of his sabotage was now perfectly preserved, time-stamped, cross-referenced, and reviewed by the legal team with brutal clarity. Royce called me personally. "Emily, I don't say this lightly, but you saved the company." "I know," I said without apology. He laughed. "Would you consider stepping into a new leadership role? The board is extremely interested." "Let's talk about it soon," I said. "Right now, I'm just enjoying the moment." And I was, because as I walked back into the building 3 days later, on my own terms, with my own legal team behind me, the mood was different. The same people who had looked through me now looked to me. Even the front desk attendant smiled like she was watching a movie she hadn't expected to love. When I reached my old floor, I found Darren in a glass-walled conference room, hunched over a pile of reports, eyes bloodshot. His tie was loose, his confidence gone. I knocked on the glass once, then pushed the door open. He looked up. I gave him a smile. Not cruel, not smug, just factual. "You know," I said, stepping closer, "for a guy who said I was only good for paperwork." I held up a thick folder, the original system logs, patent filings, and every oversight he missed. "You're not even good at paperwork." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. That afternoon, the board voted to remove him from his role. The words were sterile: executive misconduct, breach of protocol, violation of internal ethics charter. But I didn't need vengeance in headlines. What I got was better: control, integrity, respect. They offered me Darren's office. I declined. I didn't want the same glass walls he used to isolate and dominate. I wanted a space where people didn't look over their shoulders, but looked forward. So I took a different office, one with fewer windows and more whiteboards, because we were building something new now. And this time, it had my name on it. I kept the flash drive, the one I used that night I ran. It sits in my drawer like a souvenir. Not a fear, but a fire. Of every late night, every stolen credit, every condescending smirk that led to this. They underestimated the quiet one. The girl they dismissed as background noise. But I wasn't the background. I was the architect of the future they were trying to fake. And I didn't just come back. I rebuilt the room and made sure next time the door stayed open for everyone they used to overrule.